Rahim, I'm really looking forward to having your colleague Kyle Grooms come and join us today. I think he's going to help give us some insight into what are the 3 M's that people face.
Yes.
What else do you think we're going to get out of it?
I think we're going to learn about managing the psychology behind our lives, and what happens to you when that unfortunate event or you have a life event. How do you prepare for that? Kyle is a consummate professional. I'm really excited about what he has to say, and we'll get a lot of good tidbits from it.
Awesome. I think this is going to help people develop a bit of a comfort level when it comes to their financial planning and help them look to the future and enjoy life as they planned it, as long as they stick to the plan.
Right. You can't go at this stuff on your own.
Yeah.
You have to have a professional walking you through it.
Let's bring in Kyle.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Rahim. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So why don't you start off by just telling us a bit about yourself and the business that you're in and how you got in it?
Sure. So I'm from Kingston, Ontario originally, and I went to university there, and it's where I met my spouse, Brenda. Brenda's originally from Peru. She moved here, I guess she was 10 years old. Anyhow, so we met each other at Queen's, and then we came to Toronto. And soon after, I got into the financial business, and Brenda started a private school. So Brenda's a principal at her school, and Brenda and I just had I shouldn't say just, but we have a 2.5-year-old, Penelope, and she keeps us busy on the weekends, and we're having a lot of fun with her. That's a bit about me. But I got into the business in 2012. 2015, I came to the firm that I'm partners at now, and that is Penmore Financial. We specialize, or my role there is to specialize in individual financial planning. That involves insurance and investment planning.
Awesome. So we've got your colleague here, Rahim. So I thought you knew everything, Rahim. So why do we have Kyle here? What's going on?
I know so little. Kyle, we're very fortunate to have you. As Caroline alluded to, you and I have worked together for 6-7 years since I've been at Penmore. And as an advisor, one of the things that, always intrigues me is the type of work you guys do is ties to what you do. So the challenging part that when I peel back and when I talk to plan members, and one of the questions that comes up all the time is, how does one go about finding an advisor? Like what is the ground floor level at which one needs to start, or how does that conversation work?
So when in the advisory world, I would say there's 2 main segments. There's what I would call captured advisors, and then there's the independent channel. Captured advisors, an example of one is one who would work in a bank. So say RBC or BMO or whatnot. And so to find an advisor, you could literally walk into the bank and ask to talk to a financial advisor there. Now, when you go down that route, you're going to be talking to someone who is qualified. However, they are going to be suggesting bank products. And a lot of bank products are fine, but in the independent world, you have access to all the products out there. So as an independent advisor, I'd say they're a bit tougher to find, to be honest, because we're not on every corner in Canada. You can find a bank on every corner in Canada, right? So and I would suggest, and I have a bias here because I'm on the independent side, but I would suggest looking at an independent advisor. And to find one, you might want to start with someone and ask for who they use. So someone you trust, someone that you look up to as far as how they manage their finances, see who they're working with, and maybe they can make an introduction. The reason I say that is there's a lot of trust involved in our industry, and there's some accountability there. So when I receive a referral from an existing client, there's a lot of accountability there for me because I know that existing client's also going to know how this process goes. So that's where I would start.
Okay, that's awesome. So are you saying that a captured advisor, they would only be able to sell products of that organization who employs them, whereas your channel, the independent channel, can go out and seek products all over the marketplace?
Correct. And there's a lot of examples where it's meaningful to have that flexibility.
Right.
Quick example, I deal with setting up disability insurance policies. And I had a case where I was working on this week where the company that I would generally go for this specific product this person has some medical issues they're dealing with. And so when I did a preliminary assessment to see what the result would be on a disability application, the company that I wanted to go to in the first place was not going to give a good offer. So then I went to another company, and that company was going to give a much more favorable offer. So having the ability to go to the marketplace as opposed to just having one company's product show is really meaningful.
You talked about insurance. When I think of a financial advisor, maybe I'm biased towards it. I think investments. You talked about insurance. So maybe double click and tell us a bit more about your role and what that encompasses, and, how does the client actually get value from having an advisor?
Sure. So when I'm looking at a client's scenario, there's a few things we're looking at. Cash flow. After cash flow, and cash flow has to do with budgeting. So, how interest rates have gone up recently. That's really squeezed some people. So what can we do to help navigate that? Sometimes it's moving, paying off higher debts quicker and whatnot. So we look at your cash flow. Then we look at your insurance plan. Then it's the investment planning, retirement planning, tax planning, and estate planning. And the reason it's in that order, the insurance planning comes up before the investment planning in my approach. And the reason is because if you can think of yourself as an ATM. So imagine you had an ATM in your living room, and this ATM provided your bank account $100,000 a year. And the person who sets up the ATM says, listen, the issue with these ATMs is they can break down. And if it breaks down, the $100,000 is never coming back. However, the person setting it up, the service person says, if you pay $100 a month, I'll come back and I'll fix your ATM. So essentially you're paying $1,200 a year to make sure, no matter what, that this ATM continues to give you $100,000 a year. If this was a true story and you had an ATM in your living room and you had friends over, you are the ATM in this example. Your ability to go make an income every day for your family, to pay your existing bills, to save for the future, to save for unforeseen events, it all has to do with your ability to make an income. So when I plan to say, hey, we should save a certain amount of your income for the future, I'm assuming you're going to have an income. But what if you don't have an income every year? What if you get sick? I was listening to one of your podcasts that you just did on bankruptcy. And the number 2 reason for bankruptcy is people getting is a change in health. So a lot of financial planning you might think has to do with numbers, and it certainly does. But I'll tell you, the numbers are the easy part. I have a lot of software and calculators that can help on that part. The tough part is dealing with the emotions of clients. And I understand that talking about getting sick, or even worse, passing away.
Right.
It's an extremely tough conversation to have with folks, very vulnerable. You start talking about their health, and we go down conversations that they have not had even with their spouses or their kids or really anyone. However, it's important for the advisor to understand that having these conversations is probably more vital than even having the retirement conversation, because we have to make sure that income's coming in, whether you are sick or not. And God forbid, if you pass away and you have a young family, we want to make sure that family can still meet their financial needs, and not just their needs, but their lifestyle. So staying in the same home, staying in the same school, so your kids don't, can stay on the same hockey team and go to dance and whatnot, right? So we really focus in on the insurance portion. And I would say that that is a question that we don't get asked as much, that we should get asked more by people who are trying to figure out their financial plan is, can you help me with my insurance plan?
Kyle, I can see right away the value of having that you in the room facilitating that discussion, right? So number one, having that difficult conversation, putting cards on the table, what happens if? Because no one likes to have that conversation. So that is definitely a value I can see, facilitating that and planning insurance, investments. Why else would a person work with a financial advisor? There's a lot of people like myself that probably know enough to be dangerous, right? And I've been in this business almost 30 years. So I've picked up a lot of the tips and the tricks. But what else would you say is another reason to have an actual financial advisor?
What a financial advisor can do outside of the numbers, which is figuring out how much you can spend in retirement and whatnot. Really, the goal of a financial advisor is to provide you with peace of mind. So we all have some angst about different things in our life. One of the major things is finances. Whether your income is $50,000 a year, $150,000 a year, or $500,000 a year. I deal with people in that spectrum, even higher, and they all have some sort of financial angst. What working with a financial advisor is supposed to do is to give you some peace of mind. And when you get that peace of mind, it can penetrate into the rest of your life and hopefully increase the quality of your life, increase the quality of your relationships, because you have this angst lower. And the way we do that is we take you through, at least my approach is we take you through a process that starts with a discovery. So we ask you a lot of quantitative questions, but the majority of our questions are qualitative questions. And then I take it back for an analysis, and then we come back with a recommendation. And the most important part of our process is we recalibrate.
What kind of questions would you be asking? Forget the number side, but the qualitative types of questions.
So qualitative types of questions might be, and don't feel you have to answer, Rahim, but these are some of the questions I might ask. On the insurance side, Rahim, if you didn't come homeless as you got into a car accident, you tell me what it is you want your wife and your 3 kids. And I'm not looking for numbers.
Right.
I'm not looking for you to say, well, I want $5,000 a month to come in. It's not like that. And usually the answers I get back are, well, Kyle, I want to make sure that my kids have enough money for education. That's important. I want to make sure that they do not have to move out of the house. In my example, I'm going to say that you are the higher income earner in the home. So I want to make sure that the lifestyle, because we go on 2 family trips a year, all 3 of my kids are in sports. I want to make sure that that can still happen. So you just tell me there was no numbers in that conversation.
Right.
But I can take it back. And yes, I do have to do some calculations, because if your income is $50,000, the amount of insurance you need is going to be a bit different than someone's income who is $200,000.
So for those folks who like tangible things, and we talked about the conversation and you capturing that information, maybe expand on what the financial plan looks like and the output that it generates, and how do you go about reviewing that information with your clients? Because I imagine your clients are not just it's not a 1-year transactional type situation. It's a relationship over many years and decades. So maybe talk to us a little bit about that output that clients will get.
Sure. So when I do a full financial plan, as I mentioned before, we're looking at cash flow, insurance planning, investment planning, retirement planning, tax planning, and estate planning. The output comes in about generally a 25-page plan, extremely detailed, and a lot of it does have to do with numbers.
I hope that's font size 16.
Well, I can tell you the engineers really enjoy it. For everyone else, what we've done, and it's a good point, Caroline, because we need to have that to show the detail, to show, what we're talking about, that we have to show the proof. However, you nailed it, Caroline. It's a lot of detail and it's not for everyone, but we need to at least do that. And what we overlay it are a lot of, before we show the plan, we overlay it with qualitative, information about, I'll use you, Rahim wanted to make sure that he could retire at 60 and golf 3 times a week.
Perfect.
Right? So that would be in your plan as a qualitative part that we made sure that we heard Rahim, that is part of his retirement goal, but then we're going to show you the numbers. Now, what we've also done is we've come up with a 1-page report. We'd consider it this report card, if you will, and we grade you. And on a 1-page, you'll see how you're doing with your cash, your investment planning, your insurance planning. We ask about your legal and other professionals. So do you have a will? Do you have a power of attorney in place? What's your family harmony? And that's important when it comes to inheritance. So if mom and dad, when they pass away, if they have any sort of means, whether it's their own home or a cottage or some assets, I'll ask you, well, how do you get along with your siblings? And if the answer is positive, well, that's great. We just make sure that that's the case. And if the answer is anything but positive, we just know that there could be some issues when it comes to the inheritance side. And one of my goals as an advisor is I want to make sure that families are always sitting down at the dinner table together before and after the fact that mom and dad pass away. And so if we can get in there before to make sure that the family is understanding of what mom and dad's wishes are while mom and dad are alive. That is a lot more success rate than waiting and then dealing with it afterwards. So that one page will give you an idea of where you stand. And if your grade isn't where it should be, you'll see where you are on that one page, and we'll give you some recommendations to get to where you need to be. But if I could end with this, plans are worthless, but the planning process is that I'm not the first one to say that. I think that was Eisenhower, the president in the States, who was a general before he was a president. And what he was getting at is real life does not actually care about the plan we just developed. Real life's going to happen.
There's also a Mike Tyson quote. We have a plan until we get punched in the face. So when life comes at you, things can veer off pretty quickly.
So I've never heard Tyson and Eisenhower in the same sentence.
That's what we're here to do, Kyle.
I agree with both of them. And the thing is, when we develop this plan, we now have the skeleton. It's kind of like a compass that you're walking through the forest, but there's a tree in front of you. So you have to go around that tree. So we're off track for a little bit, but as long as we have our compass, we can always figure out where north is. And so that's where the recalibration comes in. So we figure out a plan. I'll use you, Rahim. You have your financial plan. Everything's going well. And then something changes in your life that we did not expect. We did not see something coming. Well, the document is a living document that we then get back together, put the inputs in, and see what that did to our compass.
I think I'll add a third quote, which could be any personal trainer for a gym that simply says you can have the best plan, but you have to show up and execute the plan to hit the goal.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot here. I like the report card style. When you bring this into group retirement planning, we specialize in group. A lot of our listeners are plan sponsors. There's a lot here that has been one-on-one discussion, but I can see I'm going to call it financial wellness, your mental health around being stable and feeling good when you come to work. Now, as we enter the workplace there, what are some of the other things that you integrate with? Because this is not in isolation, right? You're looking at the whole picture of what's available to someone. So when you think about that, what are some of the questions you ask some of your clients who are at a workplace about their work plan?
So part of the financial planning process is just that. We figure out what's going on at work. Some have pension plans, traditional pension plans. Some have RSP plans, right? So we get that information directly from the client. And I also ask for the group insurance booklet. So the life insurance, the long-term disability insurance, and the rest of their group insurance. And we integrate that into a plan. So let's say we did a needs analysis and someone needs $1 million of insurance, but they have $200,000 at work, then we'll buy an $800,000 policy, as an example. Okay. When it comes to the retirement planning, we encourage our clients to maximize what their employers are offering. The employers are doing a great job, I think, of trying to offer some retirement savings for their employees and a layer of insurance, life insurance and long-term disability specifically. So we do integrate these plans. And as part of your financial plan, we're going to put these numbers that you're doing with your employers into the plan. So it's a fully integrated plan. And we make sure and we encourage our clients to maximize what they can get out of their group insurance plan before they put any dollars with us. So that's the first step. And we'll make sure that you're maximizing. We'll look at all the different investment. If you have options, we'll look at the options with you and give you some advice based on your risk tolerance and what you're trying to do. And we'll integrate that with your personal plan as well.
I have a question for you, because my perception is a lot of people in their group retirement plan are unaware of the actual details and the extra value like matching. So out of 10 people you meet with, how many of them would you say are actively in the plan and understand of that plan to begin with?
I would say a majority of them are actually in the plan. The majority understand the matching.
Great.
And so a lot of my clients are taking advantage of that. Where they probably are a little lost on some of the details is the actual value that brings and the compounding interest that is created over a long period of time, and how this can be very powerful for them later on in their financial life. So, and they might be a little confused about, say, the taxation, about what happens with an RSP. I hear it gets taxed at 50% when I take it out. So there's a bit of confusion around the details, but for the most part, they're at least in the plan and they know to maximize what the employer is offering. There are instances where they aren't. And if that's the case, that is my number one point for them to start doing before they even start hitting.
Right.
Awesome. So I'm thinking about that, younger generation, let's call it 28-year-old, in the workforce. They've got student debt. There's the matching program. There's all sorts of things. Like, this is where, how do you help them understand and prioritize? Because that's where some of those decisions, if they come into money or they're in a monthly program, where do you start? How do you help them navigate that?
Well, being successful at your own financial planning is similar to being successful at anything you're trying to accomplish. So if you're trying to get in shape, it comes down to discipline. It really comes down to discipline a lot of the time. So regardless of your income, and I shouldn't say that. I know there's a certain amount of expenses that we just cannot get by, no matter how much you try to lower your expenses. There's a base. So I shouldn't say regardless of your income. But for a lot of people, they have an income that if they took care of your base expenses and then right away focused on your own financial future, there's probably enough in the pot. What I see a lot of the time is a lack of discipline. They'd rather go out to the restaurant, right? So there's really two groups of people, high level. Money hits the bank account. They spend what they want to spend. They have a good time. And if there's money left over, they might save. Then there's a group of people who money hits their bank account, and before they do anything, they take 20% off or 10% off, whatever it might be, and they put it into their investment account and they pay themselves first because they feel that they're the most important bill out of all their bills. And then they go out and spend money on shoes or food or whatnot. So some of it has to do with a bit of discipline. But as a young person, I talked about a financial plan that has to do with tax planning and estate planning and whatnot. I wouldn't say a 28-year-old needs a full financial plan. Most 28-year-olds, really what they should be doing is maximizing their group insurance programs, being aggressive on paying down debt, especially with these higher interest rates. And if you've paid down the debt, it's maximizing your personal RRSP accounts and your tax-free savings accounts. If you can get to the point where you've maximized these accounts, then we can start doing some further planning. But if that's what you're doing, you're in a pretty good shape. And I would say most 28-year-olds have not maximized their tax-free savings account or their RRSPs. So there's a bit of room there for them to work on. But it does, just like any type of success, it's not easy. It does come down to some discipline.
So my question was, with modern technology and the self-empowerment culture we have where you could do things on your own, you could buy an ETF on your own, you could set up your own RSP account, you could do your own low-cost trading. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of, I can do it myself because I have tools. So not that you need to defend what you do, but what would be the danger of going at it alone when it comes to creating your own financial plan?
So before people come to me, a lot of the time they've been doing some things on their own. And it's the difference, again, between essentially everything, between a professional doing it and you doing it on your own. So I'll give you an example. I don't know if the folks here, they might not be able to see my haircut, but it's a pretty standard haircut. I don't cut my own hair, although I have the tool. I have scissors at home. But I know if I go to cut my own hair, which seems pretty easy, it might look easy. You might think you have the tools, but there's some nuances within there that you will make mistakes if you're doing it on your own. Even professionals can sometimes make mistakes when they're doing it. So I don't do my own electrical. I don't do my own plumbing. I could spend time trying to figure this out, but your time's worth a lot of money too.
Right.
It's valuable to a lot of people. So if you really want to know the ins and outs and the taxation of tax-free savings accounts and RRSPs and RCAs or stock options, RRC, it's endless.
Right.
If you think you're going to be an expert in it for yourself, I'm going to tell you right now.
Yeah.
It's impossible to do it on your own and do it really well. That being said, you might get lucky. You might buy a stock that really worked out for you. You might buy a low-cost ETF. And so we are democratizing the industry. And to me, I actually don't think that that's a terribly bad thing. I do have some clients come to me and they have their own ideas. And if they're really passionate about how they want to do it, I say, listen, how about you set it up? Go to an online brokerage account, set up the account. And as long as you're using a nominal amount of money, go ahead and play around. And the majority of the time, the clients come back and say, okay, I think I'm done doing it.
So a personal example, and you may or may not remember, but during COVID, when markets, like we're talking March 2020, when the equity markets fell probably 25 to 30% within 10 or 15 trading days, we had calls coming into our call center with people in full blown panic mode. And I wasn't any different, knowing that my money is long-term in nature. Personally, I had the feel that I could potentially time this thing quite well. And one of the things that Kyle and his team tried to talk me out of, probably unsuccessfully because I'm hard-headed,
Are you stubborn?
Yeah, it's that psychiatrist. Like you need that reasonable voice who will look at data and allow you to not be emotional. And I think, you may not toot your own horn, but I can toot it for you, is one of the things that advisors tend to be so good at is that psychological component, right? Because they can stop you from being your own worst nightmare. So for me, that is a testament to what an advisor could bring. You could do things yourself, but when things really get hard, you need someone's guidance.
That's a good point, Rahim. I generally am less concerned when the markets are going up. It's all about when the markets are going down. And I remember this time, as most people would, March of 2020.
Yeah.
Very clearly. And this is what we did. What we did is we knew, and you're right, within about 10, 15 business days, the market was down over 30%.
Yeah.
So what we did is we knew how our clients are likely feeling, which is extremely fearful. You can sit back and wait for your clients to call you and figure out the ones that are afraid, and you can talk to them, or you can take a different approach. So what we did is I had about 200 families that I managed their assets. We called all 200 within a 5-day period.
Fantastic.
And they all picked up.
Yes.
Because when your money guy's calling and the world's crumbling, you pick up the phone. So we talked with about 200 families in a 5-day period. And we had maybe 2 or 3 people go to cash. So it really worked in getting out in front of them. And, we were talking about how people have kind of these 2 tracks in their mind. They have the logic track and they have the emotional track. We think most of our decisions are on the logic track. 100% of our decisions are on the emotional track.
Yeah.
So it's important for the advisor to understand that and to tap into the emotional track, to influence that emotional track to make a logical decision. That's the value that I would say an advisor comes,
100%,
especially in the bad times. And if I could just bring my wife up in that moment, we have a private school and schools were shut down. The private school, the way it works, as you might know, is the parents actually pay the tuition. So she had a flood of calls as to how this is going to work. So what we did is we got into our car and we went around to every single house and we dropped off a tactical package for them. And we got online school within a week and none of her kids left and we kept going. But we were driving around in Toronto. It was eerie. There were no cars.
Right.
Wow.
And we were trying to save that business. So it was, even for me, there was a lot of emotions going on in my own world. And I'm a human too. So I had those 2 tracks too. I have a lot of emotional decisions as well. And that was a very emotional period for us. But it was, Brenda and I both saw a crisis, which we were in, as an opportunity. And we saw that day one. We knew this was an opportunity for the future, for us to be the resolved person in the room to really slow things down and calm people down. But I had to talk myself into that before I made those calls. I had to commit to myself.
Yeah, for sure. It's not easy to do when everything around you is crumbling. So The natural question is, advice sounds great to have. Everyone should have it. Costs. What is the cost of advice? And, how does that all work?
The hard costs on the investment side, for us at least, and a lot of advisors work like this. We're fee for service, which means if we manage your assets, we charge 1% to manage your assets. So if we manage $100,000, it's going to charge 1% to the account. Your account pays our commission. Okay. So that's how we get paid on the investment side. On the insurance side, when you pay $100 premium to the insurance company, let's say that's $1,200 a year, an average advisor would make about $1,800 if they set up that policy. And then ongoing, make about 5% of the $1,200. So about $60 a year. So those are the economics of how we get paid. Then the third element to that is advice. And if I sit with an existing client, and let's say we have a series of 10 meetings, likely 8 of those meetings is just pure advice, no products. We're not buying anything. Should I pay this, that down, or should I pay this down? I'm trying to get my child or my child's going to go to med school. How am I going to pay for it? Well, it's not buy this or buy that. It might be, well, we're going to take money from there. We need to do this, right? So it's not necessarily buying a product every time you sit down with us. In fact, it's quite different. We're probably putting a product in front of you maybe 10, 20% of the time. And that's only because you're trying to get from point A to point B, and the product's going to get you there.
Very good. So yeah, thank you for being so transparent, because I think that's a mystery, right? A lot of people wonder, okay, this advice sounds amazing. It's great to have someone who knows me, who I trust. We've built that relationship. You're able to talk not only the numbers, but help me in that emotional track. So it's great to know how all that works.
Well, and Caroline, just on the fee itself, hopefully that fee, and it should be made up through some advice. So a few examples there. We've had some investment clients come to us and say, hey, I think I should put all my money in oil. Well, at one point, oil went negative. If that client did that, their $800,000 account, at one point, would it be very low?
Right.
Right. And he came back and he said, well, thank God you guys told me not to do that. Well, that doesn't show up. And we saved him about $700,000 or whatever the number is, right? We saved him a lot of money, but that's never going to show up. When I was doing some financial planning for a couple, we looked at delaying their old age security and their CPP. What that did for them is when you do a financial plan, it'll tell you if you can say you want to spend $5,000 a month, it'll say you're at 100%, meaning if the plan goes to age 90 and you pass away at age 90, you'll have no money left, but you can spend $5,000. If that's your number, and then it says, well, you can actually spend 150% of that, then that means you could spend $7,500, right? Well, with this couple, in delaying their old age security, they could increase the amount that they could spend. And it's because the old age security and the CPP are guaranteed from the government. And when you delay them, you get a lot more, especially if you delay them to age 7. And in doing so, in this specific plan, it gave them more financial security. So this is what they're going to do. That doesn't really show up as a way to determine.
Right.
Right. You can't say, well, I charged you 1% and I got you with some, but it's that advice that is all encompassing in the 1% that should outdo the 1% that we charge.
So I'm thinking about a typical person, and, I know inherently that when there's a life event, that's when I should talk to my financial advisor. So what are some of those top life events? And I'm going to say top money events that take place, that just to remind the audience here of when should I call you? When should I talk to you during such an event?
Well, if I were to break it down on the insurance planning side, I break it down to these 3 M's. So these are red flags for insurance. When you have a marriage, a mortgage, or munchkins. So those 3, if you think about it, one day you're sitting having lunch and you don't have a mortgage, you don't have a spouse, you don't have a kid. And then the next day you owe the bank $800,000. You owe the bank a lot of money. You have a child that depends on you, and you have a spouse that depends on you. Those 3 M's are red flags that you should talk to a financial advisor to at least cover your bases on the insurance side. When it comes to investments, it's as soon as possible. We've done a lot of math on this. There are really 3 elements when it comes to investing: the amount of money you put in, the rate of return you achieve to the amount of time you're in the market.
Yeah.
If you were to isolate all three of them and to figure out what one's the most important, the one that has the most impact on your money, it's not the rate of return, it's not the amount, it's actually the amount of time you've been in the market. So even if you can start a little bit at a young age, it really makes a big impact. And if I could tell you, I'll jump back a bit as to how I got into the industry, if I could. When I was younger, going to Queens, I was bartending at the time. And as a bartender, especially back in my day, you made cash tips. And I was making about $300 a night in cash, 4 or 5 nights a week, living at home, golfed every day. Like I was living, I've never had more cash flow in my life, by the way, than in this scenario. However, my aunt came to me and she was a financial advisor. She said, well, you should buy a bit of life insurance and you should start investing. So I started investing. My first statement says I had put in $3,300, but my market value was $3,600. So I had made $300. And I made the $300, which is basically what I make going to work in an evening, sleep.
Yeah.
Nice.
It clicked that I own companies all around the world and that people are working for me while I'm doing nothing. And it clicked. This is pretty good. And it's that money that I saved up that when I moved to Toronto and we started our businesses, we didn't make a lot of money the first couple of years. Well, we didn't make any money the first couple of years. We were actually losing money in one of our businesses. It was that savings that I had from 19, 20, 21, and 22 that I built up that allowed me to start these businesses. So I would start as soon as possible with saving whatever you can into a tax-free savings account or an RSP as soon as possible.
That's a great story. I'm thinking not only that, but as a young person or any age, really, when you get that, I'll call it a cash injection, call it everybody dreams of the lottery, but let's face it, there's certain life events that take place. Maybe it's some grandparents that have passed away and have left maybe $25,000, for an example, to each grandchild. What are some of the events and advice you'd have around that?
So we would sit down on an individual basis and see what that person has already and what they're trying to accomplish. And that $25 or $25,000 in your case, the answer to the question could be a variety of answers. If they already have the tax-free savings account and their RSP maxed out, we're going to talk about something different. If they don't have those, say they have enough room to put it into an RSP, and I'm just going to make some of this up, say they're in a 50% tax bracket, so they're a high income earner, put $25,000 into an RSP, all things being equal, they're going to get about a $12,000 refund. So we just turned $25,000 into $37,000 without any market performance, where if you're not talking with an advisor, you might put the $25,000 into a GIC which is fine. And it stays at $25,000 plus some interest, right? So that would be an example. I have another example, but it's from someone a bit older. So this gentleman, he's put all of his life work into this company. It's going to be sold this year, hopefully. He's 71 years old. He has no other liquid savings. This company is all he has. He was going to sell, and the reason he was coming to me is when he gets the money, he's buying a condo. Should he pay down the condo, or should he invest the money and have a mortgage, right? So when I did all the calculations, I said, well, if you sell this year, what's your RSP? I said, well, why do you care about that? I said, well, when you sell, you're going to have a lot of capital gains. What we could do is we could offset that by putting some of the proceeds into an RSP. And so when we did all the math, this is actually going to save him $111,000 in taxes.
Wow.
Which he was not aware of.
Right.
And he would not have done if he did not talk to an advisor. And again, that has to do no rate of return, no market performance. That was
good
just
planning.
Pure advice, right? That's a different scenario. I know he's a little bit older, but it's a scenario where, and by the way, the end result is he should not invest with me all the proceeds. He should actually not have a mortgage. He should pay for the condo. We did the math on both sides. I would make more if he gave all the investable assets to me, but the right thing to do for the client is for them to pay off mortgage or not have a mortgage, pay for the condo, the proceeds that are left over into the RSP, offset the taxes, and then we'll start distributing money for his income.
That makes a lot of sense. The 3 events for life and then the events in investments, whether you're selling a business or coming into money or losing, whatever is the situation, talking to get that advice, even if you think you know the answer. You get that second opinion or that second thing that you never even thought about in that situation with the gentleman selling his business.
What I'd add to that is, and I've got a business partner, Daniel, and one of the things that the reason we're business partners, the number one reason we're business partners is the values that we share. And there's always a bit of a conflict of interest with an advisor because advisors like myself make money on these transactions. So the client can't help but think to themselves, am I getting the right advice, or is that advisor working for themselves? And, and so it's very clear to me, our MO, if you will, with Daniel is whatever situation we run across, the advice that we're going to give is the exact same advice we would give our mother if she was in that same situation. And that way it's crystal clear for us as to what to do for the advisor. We never second guess ourselves because we know if our mom was in this situation. By the way, we love our mothers. And so that makes a lot of extra qualified. But that is how we run our practice is whatever situation you find yourself in, you're going to get the advice that we would give our own mothers.
Awesome. So I can ask both of you this because Rahim, you wear the group retirement hat. You help employers set up group plans and helping their plan members. Kyle, you're there for the individual side of things, navigating, the full picture of everything, whether it's investment and insurance. What would you say is the barrier for people actually seeking financial advice?
So the barrier generally has to do with the emotional side. A lot of the time they know it's vulnerable conversations. The type of information I get from my clients, there's sometimes conversations that they haven't had with their friends, their wives, their parents. So they know instinctively that we're going to be asking some tough questions, and people that maybe feel that they're not in the best financial spot could be even embarrassed about where they are.
Right.
What I would say is our profession's pretty good in having no judgment, especially at our firm. We do not judge where you are right now. All we're going to try to do is to help you out, get you to a better spot. But the biggest barrier is themselves, and it's in their own mind. And really, if you can get over that, you're going to help yourself to get past that. Because once you start working with an advisor, and there are statistics out there that, if you're working with an advisor versus now, your net worth can be much higher. I would, be vulnerable and not be embarrassed about where you are and seek some help.
Yeah. And get that referral, right? From someone that you see, as you said, right at the beginning of this episode, think about someone in your life who you respect, you like where they are at in their life, and that you would trust them to give you the right referral. So appreciate that. So Rahim, any final comments from your perspective?
I think, Kyle, you've been a terrific guest, and, we really appreciate the candid nature of where you're coming from. I think the overall thing I wanted to have this podcast articulate is the importance of that advice. Like, it doesn't matter where you get it from, but professional advice is important. You've been able to tell us that. So, we're seeing that even on the group retirement side with carriers understanding that offering a product with investment selection is one thing, but the importance of that holistic advice is it's very important. So carriers have their own individual staff. You mentioned the term, the captive agent. So there are some products where they will have their own salaried advisors have these conversations. For me, it doesn't matter whether they go to an independent advisor or whether they work through carriers and they're in-house advisors. As long as people are getting holistic advice, our industry will be better for it.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd say, an employer or plan sponsor listening out there, if you've got, your group plan in place for your employees, in my opinion, working with a party that is willing to come in and do sort of that overall employee education meeting and have the capacity to then follow up, whether it's yourself or a partner within your firm, to meet individually.
So plan members are actually telling plan sponsors this. So in any recent survey where a question is asked, it's highly favorable that employees want advice and they're expecting plan sponsors to offer that, or they would like that advice to be offered within their group plan. So we're definitely headed in a positive direction in this industry. And whether, as I said, whether it's through the carriers or through a independent advisor, advice needs to be sought by everyone.
What I might suggest for the plan members out there, if you have a firm that doesn't have an individual division, whether you partner up with another firm that does, it might make sense to have people come out to your education sessions that deal on the individual level.
Absolutely.
Just to be there to field some questions, not necessarily to solicit business, but just to be there to field some questions on the individual side. I think that would bring a lot of value to those education sessions.
Just having the option on site in the moment while people have questions fresh, whether it's financial or emotional, right? With what's going on in their lives, they can book a private appointment and continue on that path. So great. Well, thank you, Kyle. Any final comments you would have for our audience today?
I think you guys are doing a great job. This podcast, I really enjoyed being here. It's educational, certainly. The ones I've listened to have been great. Keep doing the great work you're doing.
Awesome. Well, thanks for
joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing your personal stories and your professional ones as well. I think it really added color to our episode today.
Thank you for listening to the Benefits Alliance Voice. If you found this episode helpful, please do share it with your network.